Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. I'm Bunnyton and today I am going to be building a home for Suicune here, who I happened to run into on a dream island, and I was woefully unprepared when I ran into them. But seeing as they liked ocean vibes, I decided I would build a cottage up on a cliffside overlooking the ocean, and I thought that would be a really nice spot for Suicune. I decided to build it in the weathered wasteland section because they have quite a bit of cliffs overlooking the ocean. I didn't have a home for Suicune at all, so I made this little structure here just to kind of house Suicune in while I built them the actual home. Now, I did not have all of the supplies I needed for this build, so this took me quite a bit of time, but here's me terraforming the area that I plan to put Suicune on. There's a little cave under here, so there was a lot of unevenness and holes that I had to fill up, and I did not have enough material to just do this all in one go. I had to stop and go gather materials quite often. So if you plan on doing something like this, I recommend gathering materials just in general, so that if something is sprung up on you, you got the materials to just do most of it, or if not all of it, all in one go. So that way it takes you less time. But I also didn't really care about what material I was laying down on the ground here because I was going to cover it all in grass, and there's a cave underneath, so it's not like I was going to do anything crazy as far as I know right now to the ground here. I might try to make it look a little nice so that way when you're reviewing it from the side that it looks good. But I'm not too worried about that. I'm more worried about making sure everything is nice and even so I can build the home fairly easily on top of this area. I am pretty new to building different kinds of houses, so this is my first real intricate build, and I didn't have any kind of plan. So what I started doing was I just started laying out the general floor plan of the house. I was unaware that there were housing limits when I first started this build, so I accidentally make it too big at first. But that's where the doorway and kitchen were supposed to be, where the gray tiles are. And then here's me adding kind of the entryway area and what will be the porch later on. And I'm leaving space between the cobblestone and the floor here because I plan on putting white plaster wall in between the outer wall, and then the plaster wall on the inside will be the inside wall. So that way the outer wall isn't making the inside wall look the same. So here's me with the now proper sized house, and I initially start filling it in with the plaster wall, and then I realized, oh, I should fill the outside layer as the plaster and then put the outside layer again, so that way it is the biggest it can possibly be. And that worked out great. And now here's me trying to fill in that hallway area for people to walk in. And then I'm also building a chimney here. It took me a while to figure out how tall I actually wanted this chimney. I end the chimney right here, but I end up making it taller later, and it takes me a while to get there. But here I'm building a window and the first point of the house. And I end up kind of making the chimney here a little bit taller because I plan on making a second point on the house. So there's going to be two different pointed roofs in front. And I'm kind of building out a structure here to kind of gauge where that second point is going to be. And here I am building a little window in the second point. And then I kind of extend the hallway a little bit for the door. and kind of start merging them together a little bit so it's a little cohesive. And I decided this front window was a little too big, and I add wooden pillars to the side to make it more cottage-like. And I kind of fill in that entryway. And then this is going to be a little shelf on the inside. And here's me starting to fill out the outer wall and the inner wall at the same time. The outer wall is going to be mostly white plaster, but I'm going to have some of the walls with beams on them on the outside to really give it that cottagey look, while the inside is going to have like mostly just plain white walls. And then I am building a loft here. And the reason why it's not going to be a full-on second floor is because whenever you build a second floor, at least what I've noticed in my other builds on here, is that it becomes a second house. And I only want this to be one house. And I also decided that this portion here was sticking out too much. I wanted it to be a little bit closer, so I just shortened it a little bit. And here's me filling in more of the floor. And then I add the entryway and the kitchen section. And I'm now adding in some windows. This loft is going to be Suicune's bedroom and bathroom. And then the bottom floor is going to be the living room, dining, and kitchen area. And here I'm trying to figure out where I'm going to put the stairs. And then I start building the second floor wall and kind of trying to figure out how tall this is going to end up being. And this is why the roof keeps, or not the roof, the chimney keeps changing, because the house keeps becoming as tall as the chimney. So I add more to it, and then I go back into the kitchen area and I start adding some like kitchen-like tiles, but I end up changing that later. And then here's me figuring out the layout of the stairs again. Stairs can sometimes be a challenge because they're hard to kind of place properly without them taking up too much space or looking nice. So, but I think I end up being pretty happy with the placement I choose for them. I add in some more windows, and the reason why the walls are looking kind of weird right now is because I ended up running out of the material quite frequently, so I had to wait to actually fill in all of the walls on the inside. And here I'm just adding in some of the windows. And then I am decorating a little bit too early, but it is what it is. And here I am adding this giant ocean view window, and I end up adding a third curtain in the middle because the window is kind of big. And here's me adding boat rail handrails. Thought that like kind of matched the vibe of the house. And some of this furniture I end up changing later on. But I'm just kind of trying to get like the general vibes of the house down. But this might end up being changed a little bit later as I try to make it a little more catered to Dragonair and Suicune's liking. You don't see Dragonair now, but she appears later on in the video. And here's me trying to really fill in that roof and try to figure out how this is supposed to look on the inside, which was a bit of a challenge because it's such an odd shape. But I figure it out. I like start putting the roof tiles down, and I make this point here on this side, and then I kind of figure out where stuff's gonna go. But I end up taking breaks here and there because it is a challenging task for me since I've never built anything like this before. And I'm not using any kind of references or anything in terms of like where things need to be placed. I do have one reference of a singular house, but it doesn't look exactly like this, but it does have like the 2 points in front, and that's like kind of what I was inspired by, but everything else I'm just kind of winging it. So I'm filling out the chimney here, and this second point of the house didn't really become a point, so because I miscalculated what the roof tiling would look like when I put it on. But I fill out the front section here and put some flowers on it to make it look cute. Here I'm just adding more of that plaster with wood planks on to give the house more of a cottage vibe. And kind of like make those beams run down so the aesthetic looks more consistent. Here I'm just filling out the bathroom wall to make it more separate from the room, and I'm adding more decorations to really just fill out this bathroom. Trying to decide on how I want it, and I was not expecting Dragonair to appear up here because I didn't realize the bath and shower combo was their environment. So I'm just like filling it out with decorations like normal, and I added seashells to give that ocean vibe, and I'm filling out that I decided to fill up the hole in the chimney so that way rain wasn't coming in, although Suicune might actually like that, I don't know. And I added some more lights to really give the place such a cute little vibe. I wanted to make a big porch here, so I had to get rid of this section and remove all the dirt blocks so I could actually build my porch. And over this porch section, I wanted to build another roof, so I started putting blocks down to kind of figure out how the roof should look. And then about here is where Dragonair appeared. I was pleasantly surprised to see her, so I quickly filled the tub for her comfort. And then I decided to add the crystal wall for the kitchen because it's Suicune that I'm building this house for, and I don't know, crystal wall just feels very Suicune to me. But I end up changing it later to just be a kitchen like splash backdrop kind of thing rather than like the entire wall. Also, I added that magic carp on the point of that roof so that way it actually kind of looked more pointy instead of like flat. So that kind of solved that problem there. And then the second problem is I don't know how to make the side of this roof look good yet. So I'm just kind of getting rid of the floor tiling and I just fill it in temporarily and kind of fill out this bottom until I figure out what to do with it. And then I go back to adding these little beams. And kind of adding some of those bigger wooden sections as well to kind of give it more of a cottagey feel. And now I'm trying to figure out the actual roof top. And originally I was going to go for a very tall pointed roof. But I end up deciding that I don't like that. So I make it shorter. And because only one side of the roof is going to be pointed, I wasn't really sure what I was going to do with the other side of the roof quite yet. Especially since I had to blend it in with that like other roofing section that's over the porch. And then this big window also presented a problem. I didn't really know how to make it look cute yet, so here's me just like trying to figure out what even looks good, and I was like, okay, I don't like that, so I ended up changing that. And that ends up being the base for what I do for it later. And then I just go in to kind of fill out the bottom portion of this roof. Here I'm trying to figure out how to blend this roof porch section together with the rest of the roof, and now I'm taking this down. That way I can fill in the roof portion here. And then I finally figure out how to do it. So it wasn't too hard. Just kind of like made it kind of slope in towards the house. So that ended up working and I think looked really good. So I finished building the top of this portion of the roof, like perfectly pointed. And then that left me with the other half of the roof, which I was not really sure what to do with yet. But putting those stained glass windows kind of gave me an idea. So I was like, well, what if I build a stained glass window section? And I came up with that. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll just like put a bunch of stained glass windows around. And I think it turned out pretty cute. And I just had to figure out kind of like how tall I wanted it and if I wanted it to be pointed or flat. So I start making it kind of more pointed at first. And then I kind of go check and look at it. But I actually didn't like how it looked like peeking over the stained glass window. So I ended up making it flat on top. So that way the peak was actually the windows, which I thought looked really cute. And then here I am kind of filling in the porch area like underneath the roof, so that way you're not looking into like, I don't know, a weird hole, just to make it look more solid. And then here I'm kind of like expanding the porch area a bit so it looks a bit nicer. And I wanted this section to kind of like be separated and kind of have a nice cozy vibe, kind of like more like a fire pit type situation almost. And then I filled in this area to kind of like make it grassy and not barren dirt, because I didn't like how that looked. So I had to clean all of this part up. And then I added some more plants, and then I started decorating the outside more and changed the doors to look a little more modern because I felt like that matched the windows of the house better. And then here's me trying to build out that fire pit area. I add some lights, and I added a border around the porch so that way it kind of looked a little more elegant, a little more put together. And then I added some flowers to match the roof at the bottom, and then just kind of like generally add some decorations. And I finished off those beams. And I decided to add a little stained glass window on this side as well. And then I started to try to finish that window, but I ran out of the actual roof tiling, so I just worked on the chimney instead to make it a little bit taller than the rest of the house, but I decided I liked it a little bit shorter. And then I added some more decorations to kind of bring this little porch area together to make it such a vibe. I really struggled deciding where to put that. And then I added some little food baskets that are for the evolutions. And then I added this little plant. And here's me fixing the kitchen wall to be less gaudy. And then I started adding in the kitchen decorations, which I do rearrange later to make it look a little more put together. And then here's me adding a second bed for Dragonair. Since Dragonair appeared. And I'm just kind of making the bathroom a little nicer. And I haven't moved Dragonair out of her environment yet, but I will after I move Suicune in. And then I add sofa box couches to the dining area because Suicune and Dragonair are bigger Pokemon, and I wanted them to actually be able to sit in the dining area if possible. I don't know if they'll actually be able to, but I was like, the bigger the seat, the better. I added a little mailbox, and then Dragonair had some things to say. And then I was just finishing off the look of the house by adding these beams in, which I think really added some nice finishing touches. And that's mostly it. And I just fixed that window. And then here's me rearranging the kitchen. And just checking everything. I did try to add some electricity, but I haven't done the Porygon section yet, so I'm gonna do that and then add more electricity in through the house. But Dragonair saying it's too dry after being like, oh, it's so moist, it just really cracked me up. So, but this is like the final build of the house. It's not exactly made for Suicune and Dragonair's max happiness yet, or comfortableness yet. So I have to add more to it to make sure their comfortability levels are at max. But this is like the base of what I ended up with. I'm probably going to add like a lot more water to this section, so that way they have plenty of humidity and moisture, because apparently it's too dry now for Dragonair. And if it's too dry for Dragonair, it's definitely too dry for Suicune. So I'll be doing that and probably adding more things to give it more ocean vibe. I do know Dragonair likes lots of fire, so I might add some more fire elements for Dragonair's happiness. And that is the build pretty much. And here's upstairs. I added a Lapras picture of her sleeping on a rock. And then here's that ocean view. I might do something so it looks a little nicer when you look out the window. Yeah, and I have to paint those curtains. I just found them like that, so I'll probably repaint some of these things so they look a little more put together. Stained glass window for privacy. I don't know what that question mark was, but let's bring Suicune to her new home. And now Suicune finally has an actual house and a roommate as soon as I put her in there. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you like the house that I built Suicune. It was a lot of fun. Thank you so much. Bye-bye!